So my first question, your first album came out in 1991, which is Buddy's Song. How do you think the music industry has changed since you put that album out?
um, Drastically
Mhm.
be the word I would choose. I mean, back when I started, it was all about finding that elusive record deal. It was all about playing live, getting out into clubs, and I remember as young as 15, kind of making cassettes of my songs. So the cassettes were what we used to use for that process of, like, sending them off to the record companies and things like that. But of course, nowadays you just got to have a following on TikTok. That's kind of what it's about. All the record labels are signing TikTok stars. I find on one side it's better because you have your own career in your hands, if you know what I mean. I mean, you have to be tech savvy, but it is exciting for young artists because you can put music out. When I was young, wanting to put records out, I couldn't do that without a team of people. Without having the ears and eyes of record company executives going, "We want you." Nowadays, everyone has the opportunity to put their music out on Spotify and Apple Music. It's a pretty easy process. Of course, it opens up the whole kind of so many people putting their music out. The competition is pretty huge, but you do have that opportunity. I think the other thing that's changed, I mean, when I first put records out, the internet didn't exist.
Mhm.
So so obviously it's not physical sales now, and it's all about streaming, which can be helpful in one way and detrimental in another. And social media, obviously, back then, the way to kind of talk to fans, or for your fans to be in touch with you, would be through some kind of fan club, and old-fashioned snail mail. And I spent hours and hours going through fan mail, and people actually writing down, very tactile. They would send pictures and all that kind of stuff, as well as gifts through the post. Of course, that kind of stuff has slowed down dramatically as well. Yeah, I mean, where you mentioned Top of the Pops, I mean, that you didn't get on Top of the Pops to get yourself out there. It was, if you were on Top of the Pops, you actually have made it. You had some kind of success because it was a chart show. But yeah, there obviously, for an artist that was kind of up and coming, you had to kind of find ways to get out there on TV. So, like, there were all sorts of shows, like obviously things like Blue Peter, even like Saturday night shows that are equivalent to Ant Deck now. The shows like Little and Large. It was massive shows. In fact, probably had more viewership than even some of the big shows now, because there was less content out there. So it's just a very, very different landscape and very different world. I mean, I think looking back, I don't want to sound like an old fogey and stuff, but I think I preferred it how it was before, because it kind of, artists back then, your idols, as it were. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so I was listening to Prince and Nick Kershaw and Queen and all these kind of artists that you couldn't have like a connection with. It was like there was a mystique there.
Mhm. Yeah.
They were massive stars that were kind of like, so it was like a different thing to what it is now. Now you can DM them on Instagram. You may
Yeah.
not get an answer, but you might.
And with your first album in 1991, obviously came the massive hit of The One and Only. How did that change your life?
In many ways, to be honest. I mean, it was quite a fast thing. One minute I was playing piano in local pubs, and I was like the piano man in the corner. And it literally was like within a couple of weeks, I went from doing that to filling out arenas. So I mean, it changed my life in as much as my life was not my own anymore. I didn't know what I was doing from day to day. I would be woken up and I didn't know where I was. So they'd be like, "Oh, you're in Hamburg, right? What are we doing? You're going to Belgium, and then we're going to go to Sweden, and then we're going to end up in you're doing a show in Leeds." So
Yeah.
it changed, but also obviously fame changes the way that your life is run. I couldn't really just go out, and all my friends at the time, I was only 19 when that record came out. So all my friends were going to university and just doing normal things like going to the pub and cinema or whatever. And that kind of, all of that stuff kind of wasn't available to me. I mean, I wouldn't change it for the world because I was, doing really fun things, traveling the world. But yeah, it changed everything and never really kind of came back to normality, because I still, I mean, I've been famous for 30 years now. So it's not the same, it's not like I can go out now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
you can actually
maybe
leave the house.
yeah, perhaps I'm more used to dealing with the public now, and back then it was all a bit kind of like rabbit in headlights.
So I love 60s music, and obviously your dad was in the band The Tremolones. Was he an influence in any type of way?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I have fantastic memories of my dad. Even as young as like 6 and 7, he used to take me and my brother and sister to gigs, and we'd be looking through the curtains from the wings and see his like flowing hair and his shirt undone to his navel and his leather trousers and knickers being thrown on stage, and it was,
Rock
I
and
mean,
roll.
yeah, utterly rock and roll. And all my dad's friends were 60s superstars.
Mhm.
Bands that you probably wouldn't. I don't know. Maybe you would know if you're a fan of 60s music. But my dad's friends were like Jerry Marsden from Jerry and the Pacemakers, and
Yeah.
the Marmalade, and the Searchers, and Herman's Hermits, and all those great kind of English beat bands at the time. They were like a fixture in our house. I mean, a lot of the times my parents would throw parties and we'd have to kind of get up in the morning for our school and step over sleeping musicians, and it was pretty crazy upbringing, to be honest. And yeah, his music, I've always loved the Tremolo's music, and I think because my dad is a music lover, I discovered his vinyl collection at a very early age, and Beatles came along and changed my life, and that was it.
What type of music do you like personally?
Well, yeah, I grew up on Beatles. Really, that was what the Beatles were. What made me what I really wanted to do. Songwriting in particular. I just, that music is just so ubiquitous and so kind of. I feel like those songs were not written; they just became.
Yeah.
They're like, it's like air. They're just part of what we breathe. And. I'd say the Beatles, and I loved all those 60s bands that I was just talking about just now, and Elvis Costello was a big one for me, Stevie Wonder, David Bowie. But then when I started growing up and getting into my teens, it was Prince. He changed everything for me again. You realize what you can do as an artist. And then people like Nick Kershaw and Howard Jones. I love their music. So. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many these days. I'm still inspired by artists now. Like my favorite artist at the moment is Phoebe Bridgers. So I've never stopped. Following me. I just love music.
And that's what matters, isn't it? It's having that love for music and the love for your job. Recently, the 90s have made a massive comeback in terms of music, but also in terms of like fashion and just culture. Why do you think that is?
I think decades of music and fashion and politics and everything, they come around. It's weird because obviously I'm known for putting music out in the 90s, but I don't believe that I was ever kind of like I wasn't like a fashion guy at all. I think that like for me that happened when I was young. The 70s were very kind of like they'd come round again, and people were wearing flares, and in the 90s people were wearing flares, and it was that's what was coming back as kind of like, oh, it was cool to be like that. But and then kind of in the 80s it became the 70s and the 80s, and the 90s it became like the 80s, and nowadays the 90s have become like the cool thing, although I guess even 2000s are kind of coming back now.
Absolutely, yes. It's like a massive trend.
Well, it's like a nostalgia thing, which is why us artists that kind of started in those days are now kind of like doing well on the live circuit. There's these festivals like like Rewind and Let's Rock and what they call the Heritage Circuit.
Yes. Speaking of festivals, you're doing the Pop World Festival in Liverpool. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I think it's going to be a huge party because I think Pop World has been around for a while, but it's coming back to its spiritual home, which is Liverpool. And it's at a great venue. And I think we've got a great lineup as well. Really some great artists coming through. I love those kind of gigs. Backstage is always fun. You know, we all kind of know each other from days gone by, and we've all played together and, stayed in touch. So it can be quite a fun experience backstage, kind of hanging out with these people. And of course, the crowds are just there to have a great time and relive their youth. So for us, we feel that, we step out on stage to a crowd like that. It's always very colorful and very kind of welcoming. The warmest crowds that we play to, really. Because they're kind of like our gang, if you know what I mean. They're our people because we're similar age. We grew up with the same things, the same music, the same politics, the same fashion. We all grew up in the same thing, so we have a lot to relate to. Mm-hmm. And of course, what's happened as well is we get people of your generation coming with their parents, and you get introduced to that music and to us, and it's just wonderful. It becomes like a full, even like grandparents come along, and that's really wonderful. So it's we love these kind of shows. So I am absolutely looking forward to Pop World.
And what's your favorite thing about performing live?
Just the connection with people, really. There's nothing quite like that, walking out on stage and feeling that love. It's funny because the one and only is now 32 years old, something like that. And I feel like it's gone off to and created its own emotional connections with people, and that really have almost nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. And playing live, what that does is it connects me with those connections, if you know what I mean. So, absolutely. So if I hear about these stories of people that are, I don't know, proposed to their wife when the one and only was on at a club, or it was played at their friend's wedding, or even funerals. I've had that a lot. People whose it was their favorite song, and then it was played at their funeral, and so then perhaps the family will come to see me play, and then it's you don't know what the connections are, but you get introduced to it and you can feel the love. So I love that about it, and being able to to portray any kind of music on a stage is a privilege.
I was going to say, almost every football match I've been to, I can guarantee that song is played and everyone is singing it, because it's one of those kind of like great British anthems. Everyone just knows it, and that must be really rewarding for you, knowing that you sung that and now thousands of people sing it back to you. Yeah,
it's kind of weird. Yeah, because you hear this for older people, I'm sure, all the time. Like, we never feel any older, really. I feel like that 18, 19-year-old kid that started and put that record out. And so for me now, 30 odd years later, it feels weird that it's become kind of that cult record, because it just happened, if you know what I mean. It just happened. It's like, I call it a song with wings, and sometimes they come along, I guess, and I'm very lucky to have been involved in a record like that. But I'm very, very humbled by it. It's pretty amazing.
How are things looking for you as an artist?
Pretty great, actually, at the moment. I've got a new record coming out, hopefully either later this year or beginning of next year, which I wrote and produced with a guy called Jake Gosling, who is the guy that discovered Ed Sheeran. So he's a pretty high profile producer, and I'm very excited about this record. And I've got loads of gigs. Anyone interested in coming to any of my gigs other than the Pop World show? I think I'm in Liverpool quite a few times, actually. ChesneyHawkes.com. There's just tons of stuff going on for me at the moment. I'm very much in demand, which is great.
And if you could bring one thing back from the 90s, what would it be?
That's a tough one. I would bring back early Radiohead. The Bends, OK Computer, Back in those days, that's all I just wanted to be in Radiohead. See, that would be what I would go to see, if you see what I mean. Like as a heritage, as a nostalgia thing, I would go and see Radiohead.
Do you think music nowadays is timeless?
I think there are certain artists, yes. I think there will always be those records that break through and stick around and have longevity and are kind of like handed down like a mantle. Those artists that make a difference and change kind of the landscape of what happened what's happening in music, you know, they're always going to be around. So I think there's always going to be artists, you know, that are going to do that, you know, even creating new genres or kind of like mashups of genres and just, you know, break through and become like huge. Those are the ones that stick around.
Thank you.